A very good evening to you and welcome to RTV News with me, Fiona Mbabazi. Now, health experts in the country have noted that people must start this new year committed to implementing the guidelines in place to fight the COVID-19 pandemic if the scourge is to be defeated. Serge Nori kicks off tonight's edition with that story.
As Rwanda ushered in 2021 on Friday as the clock struck midnight, there were no celebrations as is usually the case. This as the COVID-19 pandemic has infected more than 8,300 people since it was first detected within the country's borders in March last year, killing more than 90. Health experts like Dr. Vedast Ndahindwa insist it all comes down to what sort of preventive measures are in place and if they are actually being respected. The measures that were initially implemented were so successful, people became complacent, thinking that we were all somehow immune to the pandemic, and so infection rates began to spike. If people continue on this path and fail to realize that we must all play our part in properly implementing these measures, the pandemic will eventually overrun us. You have seen how in the last 2 days alone, it has seemed that things are getting out of hand, with 6 or even 7 people dying in the space of 24 hours. We saw nothing like that at the start of the pandemic. We went for more than 3 months without a single fatality. Dr. Ndahindwa's warning is dire indeed, but Rwandans say they are determined to win this fight one way or another. Our wishes this year will require that we work for them. They won't just come true. When they tell us to be home by 8 p.m., they are not preventing us from making a living. They are urging us to protect ourselves, and we should understand that. We will beat this pandemic if we work together as a people, respecting the measures in place, protecting our life, our families and friends. These are not just directives the government haphazardly put in place. They are meant to help us protect ourselves from the pandemic. These are our lives we are fighting for. Health experts in Rwanda have been noting, however, that people in the country must start this new year committed to implementing the guidelines in place to fight the COVID-19 pandemic if the scourge is to be defeated. The infection rate has been on the rise. That is clearly indicated through the figures. However, what people don't realize is that the rate is multiplying itself many times over as the days pass. As we begin the new year and wish each other prosperity, we must commit to making sure that we all make it through alive. The country's leaders are also calling on Rwandans to take to heart the lessons 2020 has left behind.
Igihe iki cyorezo kizaba kitagihari. Isomo twakuye muri uyu mwaka ushize nuko iyo twitwaye neza tugashyira hamwe nta cyaduhungabanya. Twese tugomba gukomeza kuba maso mu mezi ari imbere igihe urukingo rwa COVID rutaratugeraho. Kubera imbaraga zanyu, ubushake no gukunda igihugu twese dufite, uyu mwaka utangiye uzaba mwiza kurusha uwo dusoje. Twirinde rero buri wese yite ku bandi.
For more than 9 months now, Rwanda has been fighting to contain a virus that has now infected more than 84 million people across the globe and killed close to 2 million.
Now, the start of this year has seen the African Continental Free Trade Area's commencement of trade, and President Paul Kagame has tweeted his congratulatory message to all who came together to make the agreement possible and urged everybody else to play their part to make it work as it should. Now, the African Union Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat also noted that the journey towards the economic integration for the Africa that Africans want has now begun in earnest, and other African officials, like the president of the African Development Bank, Akiumi Adesina, also congratulated the continent for opening the largest free trade zone in the world. Now, during discussions among Africa's leaders in December last year on the Trade Africa's opening and start of trade, President Kagame reiterated on the need for the continued active engagement of the continent's heads of state and government to make the initiative a success.
The Continental Free Trade Area is the lifeblood of our continent's integration and prosperity. It will also be the primary portal through which Africa engages with its partners around the world on trade and investment. We must therefore work together continuously to protect and strengthen this pact for the sake of the generations that follow us.
Now, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, Wamekele Mene, pointed out that if properly implemented, the free trade agreement can help 100 million people come out of poverty, many of them women engaged in businesses. He also noted that it will also help address gender inequality issues when it comes to income, as well as an assist to SMEs to access a far bigger market. All of Africa's nations have signed the trade agreement and 34 have ratified it. The African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to double intra-trade by 2035, and it has remained at just 16% so far. Meanwhile, trade between Africa and Europe is at 60% and 50% with Asia. Now, when Rwandan forces are seen patrolling Bangui, which is of course the capital city of Central African Republic, there is a great deal of assurance that manifests in the faces of the country's residents. Now, in this report, we trail RDF forces on their duty in the suburbs of Bangui and how they carry out their duty.
On December 20th, that is when a contingent of the Rwandan Special Forces departed from Kigali International Airport to Bangui, the capital city of the Central African Republic. This was 7 days to the general elections in the war-torn nation. The rebel coalition of CPC, under the leadership of former president of the Central African Republic, Francois Bozize, had threatened to disrupt presidential and parliamentary polls, also calling on citizens to boycott these historic elections. Haruna Duamba, a Pan-Africanist and a founder of Pan-African organization ANA, says that his heart settled when Rwandan Special Forces landed at Mpoko International Airport in Bangui.
Rwanda is like, when you pray to God, you don't see God working. But Central Africans prayed for God's intervention, and God sent Rwanda. People should not be afraid of saying that. We should say this much often to encourage President Kagame to accomplish the good work he's doing for the African continent. President Kagame has shown the world that he is a Pan-Africanist. He fights for the dignity of Africa. The moment I saw Rwanda's special forces land in Central African Republic, I was overcome by emotions. I started shedding tears of joy. I realized that Africa has risen.
Le continent se réveille.
During his interaction with members of the press, President Paul Kagame talked about the duty of the Rwanda's additional forces in the Central African Republic.
We have our own police contingent operating there in Central African Republic that secure displaced people's camps. And sometimes these displaced people's camps have come under attack themselves, so which means now even our police would be under attack by these groups. So the additional force we sent there under a different arrangement is simply to make sure that we can contain any situation that either is aimed at disrupting the elections and also that any groups that would target our forces. So this force would really deal with the matter and without being constrained by the other rules of engagement.
Upon their arrival in Central African Republic, Rwanda's special forces were deployed in key areas in the country to ensure peace and security. On December 27, when the Central African Republic went to polls, Rwandan forces were seen patrolling polling stations. The special forces were also moving side by side with their compatriots serving under the UN peacekeeping mission, MINUSCA. Right after casting his vote, the incumbent president of the Central African Republic, Faustin Archange Touadéra, commended Rwanda's role in peaceful electoral process in his country.
Je remercie très sincèrement le président Paul Kagame.
From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank President Paul Kagame and the government of Rwanda and the citizens for their contribution. They have really helped us in this journey by ensuring the safety of our people in Central Africa, and they have gone to the polls without fear. We are very grateful. Since their deployment by the UN peacekeeping mission, safety has been felt. We are thankful.
On New Year's Eve, it was all celebrations in the Central African Republic. Partygoers in Bangui were out and about, dashing off 2020 and ready to welcome the new year 2021, all singing in one accord, "Long live Rwanda, long live President Kagame."
Our security is guaranteed. Look over there. We are being guarded by Rwandan forces. They are very disciplined. I have a great deal of respect and admiration for them. They represent Africa with such great pride. Rwandans have done a great job. You are here standing guard, patrolling to ensure our security. I'm so proud of you. I believe in you. We owe our security to Rwandan forces that have enabled us to celebrate New Year's Day. We have been surrounded by rebel groups and enemies of the country, but Rwandan forces arrived and secured us. We are now going to drink until dawn.
In the middle of the night, gunshots were heard in suburbs of Bangui, but this was not a security incident, but rather gun salute, marking the end of 2020, ushering in a new year. Apart from the special forces and the Rwandan forces serving under the UN peacekeeping mission, Rwandan contingent were reinforced with some 300 RDF forces that arrived in Bangui from South Sudan. Reporting for RTV News, Ethan Tashobia.
Well, thank you, Ethan, for that story. Now, secondary school students in boarding schools across the country have expressed gratitude after the school administrators made an effort to help them celebrate the new year away from home.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought somewhat bizarre situations to life both in Rwanda and across the world. And here in Rwanda, an example of that would be students spending what should be their holiday season in boarding schools instead of being with their families. The year did not go well for me because I am in senior 6, my final year in high school, and because of the lockdown, we started the academic year at a time we should have been sitting for the national exams. Obviously, I am not as happy as I would be had I celebrated the new year with my parents, but being with my fellow students here is not so bad either, because they are my friends and we are used to each other. Basically, we should be in the holidays, celebrating with our parents, but here we are at school. Just like at home when our parents were preparing special meals for us during these festive times, here too they have tried to change up the meals a bit and show us a good time. I don't think anyone is complaining. Adapting to the strange academic year has been something parents have had to do as well. Obviously, we all miss each other, but students must be trained to persevere when they go to study and acquire knowledge. They know why they were sent to those boarding schools, so this is something they have to endure. They cannot just up and leave trying to head back home, which is not that easy for many, by the way. If our child were to return, we would have to get them tested to make sure that they have not been infected with the virus. School administrators, meanwhile, say the decision to ask students to remain in boarding schools was not an easy one, but had to be made nevertheless. They may be thinking of the good food they would have been eating had they been at home right now. But you saw for yourself the food we cooked for them here at school. Irish potatoes, rice and meat. That may sound like nothing special, but remember, those are extra costs their parents would have had to incur had we let them go back home. Over the next 2 months, therefore, we intend to organize a meeting with their parents so that we can decide on how we are going to deal with the costs of ensuring that the term is concluded well. We explained to them the situation, that going back home now for the holidays could result in many of them getting infected. And because they had spent so much time at home anyway, it was not difficult to convince them to stay. We then worked on doing some of the things their parents would have done for them, some of the things they like about the holiday season, at least what we can do for them. In March last year, all schools in Rwanda were closed because of the coronavirus pandemic after the first case was detected within the country's borders. Students would not return until November, 8 months later. It is expected that the current academic year will end in the first 6 months of this year of 2021.
That story sums up tonight's edition, and thank you very much for being with us. My name is Fiona Mbabazi. Have yourselves a very happy new year and, of course, a fruitful, blessed year ahead. And do remember that you play an important role in stopping and flattening the COVID-19 curve in the country. Enjoy the rest of our programming and good night.